and welcome back to Full Course Scootering. We're going to check out all of my scooter parts collection, kind of a lot of the stuff that I have kept over the years, and share it with you guys. I did do a video when I first started the channel. A user by the name of Connor Platten left a comment on an older video of mine. I've been meaning to do this for a while, saying that I should do a run through of all of the scooter parts that I have collected over the years. So that's what we're going to do today. Thank you for the suggestion. I know that was a while ago, so if you're watching, thanks. And before we get started, make sure you like the video. Let's try and get to 50 likes on this video. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. We really want to build this channel up and grow the community. Our first one, I used to have a set of these, but it is this here steel peg. I got a set of these back in 2016. I went down to San Diego for SD10, I believe. I went and got these at the scooter farm, and I believe these are actually Scooter Farm's pegs that I think they made them themselves, but these were the Elliott Arnold signature pegs that I got. I really liked them because they were just like little tiny pegs that you could use. I think they called them the chink pegs. So yeah, this is the Scooter Farm Elliott Arnold chink peg. Next up on our list is another set of pegs. These are the pegs that I just did a review on. These are the Twilight Scooters aluminum pegs that they make. Next up, this one is very random. This is the old Addict brake that is unused. The owner of Decadent's skateboard shop gave this to me when I bought a scooter from him, and we'll get to that here in a few. So this is one of their plastic brakes that they used to run. I don't know if they still run plastic brakes or not, but yeah, unused Addict brake from like 2012. Next up, we have the Triad Stalker wheels that I did a review on. I still want to ride these. After riding them for a short bit, if you don't have the proper spacers, or if you don't have a Triad fork or a deck to go with it, they just don't line up right, and they're just super hard to like make sure that they get tight and make sure that they're like compatible and just straight and stuff. So they're just a really big pain in the ass to use. I really want to keep using them. I don't have the proper spacers to use them, so that's why they are not on my scooter. Next, we have a very special part to my heart. These are the Tilt Legacy Isaac Miller forks. They made a limited run on these. I made a video on these a while back as well. All the videos that I've made on all the parts that I'm listing, I will leave in the cards if anybody wants to go check those out. Isaac Miller has always been one of my favorite riders. I think they made 375 forks. This one is number 150. My good friend Tyson gave this fork to me because he didn't need it anymore. And he knows that I like Isaac Miller and collecting old scooter parts. And I think this is a AO peg that Tyson also got as a set, because back in the day he liked to run just one peg up front. So yep, there you go. Alright, on to the oldest deck that I own. This is the Razer Pro V2. V2s, they had this little plate that they put right here on the head tube to reinforce it, because that's where they would always snap at. These were a very popular deck when they were out, just because they were kind of I believe they were like one of the first one-piece decks that were ever made. This deck was manufactured August of 2011. The head tube angle is 81.5 or 81.5. So it was super far back. The deck isn't even 4 wide. It's like 3.8, 19 inches long. So this deck weighs 2 pounds, 8.7 ounces. Alright, on to the second deck here. This here is the District Dk2 V2i Deck. This honestly might be one of the most legendary decks of all time, because if you were scootering at this time, you most likely rode one of these decks. There was park riders that rode them, street riders that rode them. District, I believe, was the first company to make a square deck. So this deck was, I think, from 2011, 2012. So it's 4.3. So I was always told this deck was 20.5, and this thing's like 20.8. I've never actually measured this deck before. That's crazy. So this deck weighs in at 2 pounds, 15.8 ounces. Guarantee it probably weighs a little bit less nowadays because there's so much metal missing from it. And there's no axle for it, and I guess deck plugs or anything like that. Because they used to have plastic deck ends that went up in here, so that way like the front of the deck didn't bend and all that. And so I went to a local scooter shop that me and my friend Bubba got to carry scooter parts, and he actually ended up building this as a custom. It had district grips. They were like gold kind of gum grips. They were super terrible. They were almost like plasticky, like you could literally like rip little tiny pieces of it off. Terrible. It had raw blunt stripper bars. I actually ended up getting different bars. I think I got like district aluminum bars after that because they were just so short for me that they like hurt my back. It had a white district double clamp. I think it was a FSA headset with green blunt declare forks. I think they were IHC. So that's actually the only time I've ever ran a IHC was with this complete scooter that I got. And then it had white on gold yak wheels. They were the ones that had like they were like a full core wheel, but they had all like the big circles drilled out in it, and then all the little circles drilled out in it, and the rim always snapped on it. That was the colors that I had on it. And then I don't remember what kind of grip tape was on it. I think it was like blunt grip tape back in the day, and it was super, super terrible. Definitely one of my favorite decks that I've ever had. Next up, we have probably in my opinion, one of the worst scooter decks ever made, and this is the Tsi Flight 20. Ever since I was just a young little lad, I've always really enjoyed TSI. I still love TSI to this day. I ordered this from, where did I order it from? It was Inward Scooters. It was a baby blue color. You can see the blue that was still in it. It's hard to see, but the bottom of the deck has concave, so you can see where on the rails, you can see where you really actually grind at, and it's on the outsides of it, so that makes it really hard to grind rails and stuff like that, and it was just all around just an awful deck. This one is the Flight 20. They made the Flight 19 as well, as you can probably guess by the name of it. Flight 19 was 19 inches long, and the Flight 20 was 20 inches long. But what's super weird about it was the Flight 19 wasn't integrated, and the Flight 20 is. It was a huge deck for back in the day. This deck has a lot of concave on it for how like skinny it is, and I believe the head tube angle is actually an 83 on it. What was super weird about it is, I think I remember reading somewhere, if you look at the side of it right here, it's kind of rounded. Now, I heard from somewhere that was actually made like that so that you could actually do like 50-50s on coping or round rails, and I've tried it and it doesn't work. Like you have to lean like at like a 45-degree angle to actually get like the weight distribution right on it. So yeah, I don't know, it doesn't really work. And then they made the holes on the sides to take out weight, because apparently this was supposed to be a heavy deck back in the day. If you look at the shape of it, it's not consistently the same size for the foot space. Up at the front, it like tapers out, and then like right about here where my thumb is like the widest point, and then it tapers back down at the end. My friend Bubba always called it the fish deck because he thinks it looks like a fish. At the widest point, it is 375 at the skinniest point, which is, I don't know why they made it like that. It's super weird. There's not much left of this deck. This is this is TSI's first 22-inch deck, and this is the V2 Tsi Threshold. I think I rode this 2013, 2014 maybe. I snapped the brake off on it, and I noticed that it was still usable. If you can see on the bottom where it's actually rounded, so that's actually the back of the brake. And we just drilled a hole where that was, and then bent the fender back the opposite way, and just kind of remade a brake out of it, because you can see at the top right there, right here, you can see where the brake actually broke at the bolts. So yeah, we rigged it up and we were able to use the brake once again. the things that you do when you're a kid and your parents don't want to buy you new parts. Alright, now we're kind of getting into more of the modern era. Ethic Pandemonium. This is when they first came out with it. I think I got these in 2015. So this is actually when, about the time when I got onto Kicks Pro scooters. And as you can see, it says Mamba. So that was the name of the crew back in the day. Just me and a bunch of friends. This was my first one out of two. This deck I think lasted me about 3 months, and it actually broke before the warranty. So Ethic actually sent Kicks Pro Scooters another one, and they sent it to me, and I rode it for a while, and I noticed that it was cracking, and actually gave that deck to a friend of mine because he like hit some weird growth spurt and just was like 6'4", so he needed like a bigger deck, and so I gave him that one, and I believe he still has that scooter to this day. Yeah, this one is 4.7 by 22.5 if I remember right. Yeah, without the brake it comes in at 2 pounds 11.1 ounces. Now, speaking of a deck that I didn't really care for that much, this is the Flavor Awakening deck. This is the 22 by 4.7. Got this from Kicks Pro Scooters as well. I never really cared for the way that this deck rode, and I think it's because the way that it tapers in the front up here. I've always been a big fan of like Smith grinds, especially when I was younger. I did a lot of Smith grinds and it never really held them that well. And then getting into like nose blunts and stuff like that was never really that good. I think I got it around 2016. It was something that I rode after I got the Pandemoniums. So this deck weighs in at 3 pounds, 2.1 ounces. This is the AO Sagen Deck. They had another one that was like this, but I don't remember what the name of it was. This deck is actually one that I got kind of towards the end of when I was riding for Kicks. I believe I got this in 2017. And this deck lasted me like a month. Like, this was the weakest deck I think I've ever ridden. So this deck it was 23 by 5.2. Yeah, 5.2. So when this deck came out, this was actually the biggest one on the market. But like I said, it was hot trash. It lasted me like a month. And what sucked about it is I was riding it literally like right before I was getting ready to go to Woodward West, and it snapped on me. So my friend I asked a friend who had a collection of decks, and he let me borrow his Proto space deck to go to Woodward with. Yeah, so that sucked, but at least I didn't break it at Woodward, because that would have been terrible. And what was really weird about these decks is I think they made them for to be able to do Phoebsers and stuff like that. I think they still make their completes with these, but I hated the way it rode. And they have these like fenders underneath, so that way like when you do feebles and stuff, you grind on that instead of your wheel touching it. And it always made you'd be in the feeble, you'd be in the feeble, and like, I don't know, it felt like you couldn't like butt your back wheel up against the ledge to do like feebles and stuff, so you'd always like slip off. Kind of like when you kind of, you miss the ledge, and I don't know, you don't lock your wheel in next to the ledge, and you just kind of like, your deck feels like it just like slips out. That's kind of like what this deck like made you do. So I know a lot of people when they got these decks or get these decks, they'd always take the fender off and then they would just buy one of AO's just fenders that they had, or trade it with somebody. Yeah, so that was just a really weird invention that they had. I never really cared for it. And then I think when they came out with this, like maybe like a year later, Aztec came out with the Siren, the 6 wide, and then the whole scooter industry just exploded and everybody was like scrambling to try and keep up with them. On to our next deck. This is the Flavor Jasper, and I think at this time they only made this deck 4.7 or 4.8 by 23, which I didn't really care for the way that it rode. And I always described it as a pencil deck. It was super skinny, but it was super long, and I don't know, it didn't ride very good. And I actually rode this one until it actually snapped. I didn't trade it with anybody at that point. I actually got this when I snapped the AO Sagem, because Kicks Pro Scooters' policy back then was you'd get a free part if you snapped the part. Back then it was a really cool deck. I think it came out in 2017, and I think I rode it through the winter of 2017, 2018, and then I think I snapped it in the spring of 2018. So I did, it rode okay. I mean, I rode it till it broke. So this deck weighs in at, without the hardware, so no spacers, axle, or brake, at 3 pounds, 8.8 ounces. So starting to get a little bit heavier, but that is because it is a 23 inch. And I never really have been a big fan of 23. Let's see if I can get this story straight. When I was riding for Kicks, I think I quit the team while I was still riding the Flavor Jasper V2 deck. And when I snapped it, I think I wasn't riding for them. And then I remember Outset Select having a big sale on scooter decks. And so I went and bought the Aztec Fountain deck. Shortly after that, I started riding for Beamer's Action Sports. Shortly after being on the team, he actually got me onto the North Ambassador team. And so they were messaging me and they were sending me some parts. And so the first part that they sent me, well, one of them was this here, this North Paradise deck. So this was actually considered their park deck from back then. I think, what was this, 2018? I think this deck lasted me about 5 or 6 months, something like that. Kind of over the course of the summer of 2018, I rode this. This is their, like I said, their park deck. And I believe it came at one point on their completes. I believe they still kind of use this deck. I think they've just called it like the Tomahawk or something like that. But it's really like the same style. All in all, this deck actually rode really, really good. The only complaint that I had was the head tube on the front was so far back from the front of the deck. So it actually took up like a lot of foot space. But it rode really good, and I liked how thin it was. It's kind of like the Lagouche deck, or the Transits, that's what they were. So it's got the same thickness as a Transit. And it is slightly bananaed. I don't know if you can tell. No, I don't think you can tell. But yeah, it's slightly bananaed. So yeah, that was the first deck that I got as a sponsored rider by a scooter company. This one is pretty legendary. This is the Proto Orion deck. Before they made the space decks, they made the Orions. So 2016, 2017. Reason why I'm doing this now is because it's kind of more new to me than the other parts that I have. My friend Tyson actually gave me this deck as well. So he got this right before the space deck plate came out. And they kind of made it more like a Razer. So this, they only made the Orions in the size of 5 wide by 20. And I did a video on this as well if you want to check that out. And these decks actually ride really good. So later on, once the Proto space deck plate came out, he bought it. So I actually have that right here as well. This is actually, with this deck and this head tube, is actually what I rode at Woodward when I went there. Because the head tube is so big, it takes up a lot of foot space. So even on the 22 inch, you don't have a lot of foot space on it. This deck comes in at 4 pounds, 2.1 ounces. So that's heavy for how small this deck is. So the plate itself for the 22 inch weighs 2 pounds, 8.7 ounces. So that's pretty heavy for just a deck plate. Most of the weight comes from, I think, the head tube, because it's just so big and bulky. But definitely one of the coolest head tubes out there, in my opinion. I like the TDI system. Oh yeah, and the head tube angle on this is 83. Beamer's Action Sports had 2 of the Lagouche decks in. Is that how you say it? Lagouche? He had the 23 and he had the 22. Like I've said before, I don't really care for 23, so I went with the 22. And this is another one of the decks that I really, really hate. It's just because of how thin it is, it bananaed really, really bad. Yeah, it's hard to see on camera, but it's really bananaed. This thing's super beat up. And because I've bananaed, it's kind of made the head tube angle kind of go back a little bit farther. And one of the things that I absolutely hated, the signature Lagouche deck came with no brake. It just said the word brake. It says it under the grip tape. And I tried to drill holes out for it, and I don't think I drilled them out correctly, and it just didn't work out very good. So I ended up riding it brakeless, and I hate riding brakeless. I always push my foot up against the back wheel, and it has no concave, which I didn't really mind that. I'm not really a big fan of like deep concave like how Aztecs are, so that wasn't too bad. Maybe a little bit of concave would have worked for it, but other than that, it wasn't too bad on the concave. But all around, hated the way this deck rode. This here is the full core Mamba deck. This is from the very first batch that I had made. There were 4 decks. There were 2 5.5 by 22s and 2 5.9 by 23s. This one is the 5.5 by 22, and this is an amazing deck. It was raw at first, and then I got it powder coated by a couple of my good friends. And then a really fun one that I recently had made. This is just a prototype deck that I tried out, and I recently have decided that I don't really like it that much. It's way too heavy, and I will not be putting this in production. So this is a one of one deck. This one is 23 by 5.1 wide. This is the deck that I did the deck rails on, obviously. So now I will be moving on to my scooters that I own, and this will be the last portion of this video. I'm going to start off with this one that I actually don't own. This is actually my friend Bubba's that he made for his girlfriend. It's just like a spare scooter that him and one of our other friends made. We went to the Boise Street Jam last year, and they took this and left it in my truck, and I just haven't I've been meaning to give it back to them, and I haven't given it back yet. So we'll just run through all the parts. Some super short ODI long neck grips. I don't know why they call them long necks when they're super short. Black tilt scout bars. I believe they are the stock size. We have a baby Proto on all 2 really tall headset spacers. Tilt headset. TSI Paramount V1 with some Lucky SMX forks and these Lucky spiral hollow cores. I did do a custom build video on this one. I'll have that in the cards as well. This one has some Lucky like marble grips. I'm not sure what the name of them actually are, but they kind of have like a marbly color to them. And then I have the Brother Guild bars on here, the khaki color. I do really like these bars a lot. They ride really good. And then we have we have a Lucky SES clamp. We have a Aztec Circa V2 forks that I rod out, and some full core prototype wheels that are on here. I made a video on these and the forks on how to raw them out. You can check that out in the cards as well. With a Root Industries air deck. This is the 5.1 by 22. I also have a review on that as well. Everything that you see in this video, I most likely have a video on. So what's cool about this is it's flat on the bottom as well. I think Root Industries was the first company to make a fully flat bottom deck, and then everybody started copying them, so including me. Next up, we have my personal scooter here. I am riding some prototype grips that I've been working on. I have some old Tilt Scout bars. I've had these bars since like 2017. I love these bars. The Till Scout bars are probably one of my favorite bars I've ever had. I think they are 26 tall by 21.5 wide. I used to like to run skinnier bars. And then I have a rod out tilt arc SES Proto headset on here as well, along with some Triad forks, full core, hollow core wheels, black on gold. These are the new ones. Full core Viper deck in this lemon peel yellow, along with the back as well. This is a Razer Pro model. Someone did leave this at my skate park a few years ago. It was just sitting in the grass. It was there for like 2 days, and I was like, what the heck kind of a scooter is that? I was just going to go play on it, and I realized that it was a Pro model. I was like, oh dude, I am taking that home, and I am beefing it up. So, really, everything's like stock on it except for a few things. So, I got red ODI grips, the regular bars. I think I did put a new unsealed headset in it. So that way it works a lot better and spins a lot better. It's nice and tight. We got it bolted so that way it doesn't wiggle. I have some 100mm NV wheels on here because that's the only size that you can run. And the forks on here are actually Ultra Pro forks. I think they might have been on the Ultra Pro deck that I talked about earlier. And then it has some very suitable Heligrip grip tape on it that have the old school Razer logo on it as well. I thought it was very fitting. I had to put it on here. This thing's super fun to play around on. And I believe it's from like 2008. Alright, last but not least, we have this amazing custom build. So we have neon yellow ODI grips. These things are super hard. I hate them. And then we have Addict JD signature bars. They have a bottle opener on them. I think they're 23 by 23. So 23 tall by 23 wide, I think. This is not a SES. This is a blunt quad clamp. And I don't know what kind of headset is actually on it. I want to say it's maybe an FSA. We have the Addict Dagger forks. These are actually ICS forks. We have some Addict Flint Pegs on here. So the reason why they call them the Flint Pegs is, well, when you would first get them, they had a really thin layer of flint on them. So when you like grinded metal or concrete or something, they would actually spark. So that was really cool about the pegs. We have some 100mm Eagle Sport full cores here. They're really terrible. The old Eagle wheels were honestly super bad. They were fast and they performed really good, but once they started to square, the sides of it would just chunk out. And then as for the deck, we have the JD signature Addict deck, which is still in really, really good shape. And yeah, that is probably my favorite scooter out of all the ones that I own, just because it's really like a one of a kind, and I feel like you probably will never find a scooter like this ever. That is it for all of the scooter parts that I currently own, or all the ones that I have currently collected. Yeah, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like it. I want to get this video to 50 likes, and make sure you subscribed if you are not. And until the next video, you have a good one.